Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rangers Ed 150. We're going to do things a bit different this week. We're going to hold off on some fantasy hockey talk and focus on the trade deadline because I got a lot to say about the Bruins organization. We'll hopefully provide you Rangers fans with a bit of perspective on the blue shirts relative to the Boston Bruins, who are absolutely circling the drain. And for context, this segment is largely focused on Bruins management and not so much players and player performance, because I am of the opinion that the Bruins management is driving this organization into the ground. Jumping right in, Don Sweeney has been the GM of the Boston Bruins since 2015, and through that tenure, the Boston Bruins have posted a 425, 194, and 81 record, which is the best in the NHL through that time span. Don Sweeney has also made 58 draft picks for the Bruins, 9 of which were first rounders. Compare that to the New York Rangers' 70 draft picks, 11 of which were first rounders. Of those 58 picks, that Don Sweeney made, only 20 have ever played an NHL game, and of that 57, only 7 of those picks are still with the Bruins organization. Since 2018, the Bruins have made 36 draft picks. Of those 36, only 5 players have ever played an NHL game. That's 13.8% of those draft picks. Compare that to the New York Rangers, who have made 50 picks since 2018, with 14 getting time in the NHL. That's 28% of Rangers picks. So over double the amount of picks the Rangers make it to the NHL relative to the Boston Bruins. Takeaway here, there are 2. The Bruins have maintained an elite level of play since 2015 with Don Sweeney at the helm. This has been almost entirely due to the pre-existing core of players. So your guys like Bergeron, Marchand, Pastrnak, Krejci, Chara, Tuukka Rask, guys that Don Sweeney did not draft. Sweeney has been so focused on winning with this core. So compare this to the Pittsburgh Penguins, what's currently going on with them. He was so focused on winning with this core that he sacrificed a lot of assets, prospect development, threw it all to the wayside to try and get this core another cup. So the Bruins have only, in almost no circumstance through this time period, brought any prospects up into the NHL or played any prospects. So take Fabian Lysell, their 21st overall pick in the 2021 draft. He's played 3 seasons in the AHL with the Providence Bruins. He's put up 39 goals, 80 assists, and 119 points through 158 games played. He was drafted at 19 years old, so he's only 22 now. He has played 1 NHL game in those 3 seasons. For a point of comparison, David Pastrnak was put in the NHL at 19 years old, and look where he got, playing with guys like Brad Marchand, David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron. They furthered his development exponentially. Sweeney let Lysell rot in the minors instead of bringing him up to the big club. He could have learned from those very same guys, in the year that he was drafted and subsequent year or two. But instead, he was left in the AHL. Georgi Merkulov has played 4 seasons in the AHL for the Boston Bruins, putting up 68 goals and 102 assists in 191 games played. He's played 18 games in the NHL through 4 seasons. Of all 58 players Sweeney has drafted in his tenure to date, the only notable names still remaining on the Bruins are Charlie McAvoy and Jeremy Swayman. Everyone else is gone. So to cap it all off, if you factor in Matthew Poitras and Mason Lohrei, who are 2 recent prospects that have shown some promise and are getting time in the big club now that the Bruins roster has been gutted, only 6.8% of Don Sweeney's draft picks made since 2015 are having a positive impact on the Bruins organization today. Compare that to a much more robust 10% of Rangers picks. Fast forward to the trade deadline. The Bruins gave up Trent Frederic, Justin Brazeau, Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, Mark McLaughlin, and Brad Marchand. Frederic, Coyle, McLaughlin, and Brazeau I can all get over. But let's talk about Brandon Carlo. His name might not pop up much on your highlight reels, but this is the guy that you want standing on the blue line come playoff time. You don't pay players to play in the regular season. You pay players for the playoffs. And Carlo is one of those guys that gets paid to play in the playoffs. He's 28 years old. He's in his prime. He's got 2 more years left on his deal at $4.1 million per. He's a bona fide top 4 defenseman without question in the NHL. And he was traded to division rival Toronto Maple Leafs for a first-round pick in Fraser Minton. With Don Sweeney's draft history, that pick will likely be a bust. And thinking about this trade with that in mind makes steam come out of my ears. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it. I could go on all day about Carlo, but suffice it to say that Don Sweeney just traded one of the Bruins' most reliable defensemen, regular season and playoffs, in the prime of his career on an extremely team-friendly deal to your biggest rival since the Montreal Canadiens through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The second big trade, now stop me if you've heard this one before, but the Bruins traded their captain and last remaining member of the 2011 Stanley Cup championship team to another division rival, the Florida Panthers, that has knocked you unceremoniously out of the playoffs for the last 2 years running. The worst part about this deal isn't even that they only got a conditional second for it. It's that they freed up a whole mess of cap space heading into next season with all those moves they made, and they somehow couldn't find the funds to trade Brad Marchand, their captain, who was reportedly asking for a 3-year deal. I know you're all mostly Rangers fans, so let me equate this to someone like Henrik Lundqvist in terms of his cultural value to the team. Brad Marchand, it was a lifelong Bruin. He exemplified Bruins culture. He worked his way up from the fourth line to being one of the most prolific scoring wingers for almost a decade. And he earned the right to wear the C on his sweater. And Don Sweeney couldn't find it in him to give the man a 3-year deal and lead this team through a retool. I'm not going to run through the list of middling NHLers and prospects and draft picks that Sweeney's going to squander that they got for selling off all those assets at the deadline, because that's just adding insult to injury at this point. But I just want to recap my feelings on Don Sweeney, his management style, and how I see this playing out going forward. Don Sweeney's success as Bruins GM has been almost entirely predicated on the pre-existing core of players that were there when he took over in 2015. So like I said, Bergeron, Chara, Krejci, Tuukka Rask, those guys that have been leaders for that team for years. Sweeney's playbook since assuming the role of GM has been to set that core up for success by making additions through free agency at the cost of asset management and prospect development. So like I said, he traded away an exorbitant amount of draft picks. He never had prospects playing up in the NHL. And with that in mind, he has a horrific draft track record. And after, like I said, selling all those assets and getting a whole bunch of draft picks in return, the Bruins are left with a small pool of untested prospects, a whole bunch of draft picks that Sweeney will no doubt squander, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, Jeremy Swayman, and a suite of average NHLers. So as of now, to date, there's really not a whole lot to look forward to in the Boston Bruins organization, courtesy of Don Sweeney. So Rangers fans, I know at times the Rangers may be frustrating to watch, and Chris Drury really might make a move or two that leaves you scratching your head. But next time something like that happens, Drury does something that's got steam coming out of your ears, you want to jump through the TV and throttle him, just remember, it could always be worse, and Don Sweeney could be your GM. This has been your 150.